Kris and I are going to do a bit of a kind of two-hander on this. Certainly not promising to be as electric as our colleague Emma Jane, but hopefully there'll be some points that read across. A little word about Dundee Rep and Scottish Dance Theatre. So we're a producing organisation based in Dundee in a building. We have 2 full-time ensembles. So one of the last remaining permanent ensemble of actors, but also a permanent ensemble of dancers under Scottish Dance Theatre umbrella. Quite uniquely, or not uniquely, but it's not common. We're 57% publicly funded out of a regular turnover of 4.5 million. Never has that been more revealing than in recent months because of the stability that enabled us to provide, and to then enable the permanent ensemble of artists that we have on the core staff, but also our ability to reach out to freelance artists and continue to find ways to deliver. So there's something about how public investment works in this time that has been revealed in our economic model. Kris.
Thanks, Liam. So Pitlochry Festival Theatre is producing theatre up in Highland, Perthshire. We are the furthest north producing at this scale. Prior to COVID, we generally sold around 100,000 tickets a year for our 538-seat theatre. I mention that because we're in a town of 2,500 people. So over 80% of our audiences travel more than an hour to reach us. A mosaic profiling of our musical last year demonstrated that it reached 100% of UK postcode areas, however, which basically means that across the UK, every single postcode area bought at least one ticket for that production. So we're drawing people to Pitlochry. Last year, turnover was just short of 6 million, and we are, unsurprisingly, the largest employer in the region. In normal circumstances across the summer, we might have upwards of 200 people working on site. That's for a daily changing rep of 6 shows. Again, similar to Liam, unique in having an ensemble delivering daily changing rep. Our funding balance is very much on the opposite end. We're 10% subsidized last year and 90% self-generated through ticket sales, fundraising, and trading activities. Economic impact assessment last year demonstrated that the theatre, on £645,000 worth of investment from public sources, gives back around £14 million to the economy. And in terms of just scope and reach over this period of time, we moved all of our programs online alongside many of our colleagues. None of these things are revenue generating, but across our platforms from the 1st of April to the 31st of October, we generated just over 2.5 million impressions. So that is engagement with our work, tweeting, liking, watching, just demonstrating on 100,000 people coming along the level of interest and engagement with an organization located in a rural region.
So what Kris and I wanted to do was just do a bit of a kind of our own organisations, but also the work of the Federation of Scottish Theatre, which I co-chair, and a little bit of a portrait of the sector in Scotland from our perspective. So like colleagues across the 4 nations, we closed theatres on the 16th of March. But unlike colleagues in England, certainly, we have had very, very limited opportunity to engage in live performance since that date.
There was a limited number of venues in level 1 areas who were able to open in a very short window in November and December. And actually there was no work programmed over that period of time. There was no work available, and actually the time to spin up work and get it on stage, that window closed before we were able to see anything emerge.
So the industry shape, all of Scotland's producing theatres are FST members, and the membership extends into nearly every single local authority in Scotland. The membership is made up of around 200 professional companies and individuals from the National Theatre of Scotland, and I think our colleague Brenna is here at the meeting today, through to Scottish Opera, with producing buildings and individual freelancers, Emma Jane being one of them. The FST membership in total turns over in excess of 100 million per annum, with about 20% of that coming from the public purse. And it's there to promote and develop Scotland's artistic and cultural talent, promoting creativity, but also focusing on inclusivity and well-being and the role that theatre and dance can play within that. Most of our member producing organisations have been required to make a significant proportion of their staff redundant, particularly, but not exclusively, those who work in backstage or customer-facing roles.
In terms of looking at what this past year has been and the interim measures, Creative Scotland very quickly out the gate removed the contractual obligations on programme delivery so that we could make use of the funding that we did have from Creative Scotland to enable us to focus on our solvency. Emma Jane referred to the Performing Arts Venues Relief Fund. This was a lifeline, which was announced in July 2020 by the Cabinet Secretary, Fiona Hislop. This has been an absolute critical survival mechanism for the year, and it was formed in 3 parts. The first part was about staving off insolvency, focusing on the cash flow to the 31st of March this year now. The second was about the retention of our staff who might otherwise face redundancy, or the return from furlough for those people who we couldn't afford to bring back to support the organization on future plans. And the final part was the engagement of freelancers to make work and meet our civic responsibilities of engaging with our communities and continuing to serve them. So as I say, the focus on the funding was just to the 21st of March. Originally, the programme was formed of £10 million from Scottish Government. 7.5 of that went to subsidised organisations, or those organisations who had regular funding contracts with Creative Scotland. And then that was later topped up when the UK government announced the 1.57 billion arts investment of the consequentials which came through. Scotland 97 million, an additional 2.5 was allocated to theatres. In order to deliver on PARV objectives to provide meaningful work to members of staff and also freelancers and deliver on our public benefits, there was a vast range of programs of work which were commissioned or planned right through this period of time up until March, but can't be delivered due to ongoing restrictions and changing parameters. Similar to colleagues right across the 4 nations, there was investment made in all sorts of projects, which was then subsequently lost and couldn't be rolled out to audience members.
So thinking ahead in terms of the year ahead, 11 of the largest receiving and producing venues in Scotland have been collaborating throughout this period and indeed before COVID struck. And the focus has very much been on planning horizons and expectations. There's a deep desire to share knowledge and coordinate messaging for the benefit of the wider sector. The growing consensus, though, that is building within that network and from public information and discussions available to us is that the ability to plan for sizable indoor activity in 2021 feels very remote. This feels quite materially different from the expectation those organisations had at the point they submitted their PARV application last July. So thinking about that, we feel that there's a real opportunity to advocate and create together the next iteration of PARV, and something that Emma was touching on there, that really builds on that successful programme and learns the adjustments that can be made to make even more impact for the sector and indeed for audiences and members of the public. Thinking about the opportunity of scale within that, and not thinking about trying to create moments that have to then be unproduced. This new term that we've unfortunately had to learn consistently across the last 10 or 11 months. So that there's a slow and steady pipeline of activity that can create meaningful opportunities for staff and freelancers to be engaged in work, to deliver public value, and to create stability in a sector that can evolve and adjust with the year ahead and indeed beyond. If £12.5 million of investment brought the industry through the turbulent times that we've gone through so far, what can be used to kind of stabilise that fund, build on that and take the sector forward, and crucially build on the public investment that's already been made in the sector in Scotland?
At the moment, we acknowledge absolutely the uncertainty we all face in terms of what's going to happen next and what we don't know. And indeed, we're not looking at what's the date when theatres can reopen. We accept at the moment that that is an unknowable, and we're not pushing on that. Our focus has been on ensuring, and that's what we're talking about today, that there is an industry in terms of the physical infrastructure, the bricks and mortar, where we're able to gather and add the economic value that we have done previously. And also, crucially, that the skill sets, which Emma Jane took us through, the skill sets are still available within the industry when it's possible to reopen the doors. We remain conscious we will need to have discussions about recapitalization and audience confidence in due course, but those conversations can happen in time when we have some understanding about how we're able to move through this more immediate landscape. We could be focused on audience confidence right now and lose sight of the fact that many of our organizations, the bricks and mortar, and also the people who make it won't be here to have those conversations when it's possible otherwise.
By way of concluding, we think there's a real opportunity in this moment to shift the narrative and to move away from freelancers needing hardship and theatre producing organisations and buildings needing relief money, and actually talking about the level of public investment that can be put into these turbulent times so that these organisations, these skilled members of the freelancer workforce can actually deliver the public value that they want to deliver and that they're skilled and able to deliver. So let's shift the narrative away from hardship and away into active delivery, even in challenging times.